Hi, everyone. This is John DeRelay, the head of onboarding at Wheelhouse, and I'm talking to you because we're going to be starting a new series here about revenue management. This is going to be our first episode. Between myself and my teammate Keegan, we're going to be doing this maybe once a month, maybe occasionally in between. And we've been lucky enough to have one of our clients offer the use of their portfolio so that we can give you real live kind of revenue management advice and give you something to watch to see how professional revenue managers like myself or Keegan might approach certain things in a portfolio. So that's a little bit of the background. We're lucky enough to have this portfolio that's going to be in Charleston and a little bit in Sevierville, Gatlinburg area. I believe there's also some units in Lake Norman. I've done my best here to kind of avoid showing you whose portfolio this is. But it is a real life portfolio, and I'm going to be looking through this portfolio. Keegan's going to be looking through it, and we're going to be making real life decisions like we would as a revenue manager. This should give you the opportunity to kind of see trends, to see how we might approach things, to see what kind of questions we're asking, and we'll kind of narrate the experience as we go. I'm going to try to keep this to around 30 minutes today. We'll see how that goes. Because it is a live session and it's not something like I've totally planned or contrived, I may be doing some thinking, I may be doing some speaking to myself. It may be worth maybe watching this on a little bit faster speed. So to give you an idea of what I want to cover today, there's a few things. First, because this is a pretty new portfolio to me and most of the units are in Charleston, I did just want to get some high-level view of what Charleston looks like. I do have some familiarity with this portfolio, or not this portfolio, but this market myself, but I do want to go into a couple things that might help me understand a little bit about what's going on here and what I might expect. I'm also going to show you how to kind of set up your workspace. This is going to be oriented more towards like a regular revenue management process, something that I might go in and do once a week or even twice a week, sometimes even 3 times a week. I'll show you what I have pulled up, what I'm going to look at. We'll kind of walk through that process. And then I'll actually go through and look at the different kind of sales production that I would do where I might make some decisions on the rates. Anticipating some other things we'll do later on. We'll continue to do this process, so we'll see live as sales kind of occur, what kind of changes we would make, how we would look at that on a regular basis. We do have some hunches that the way that this portfolio is set up maybe needs to be reviewed a little bit. So in future installments, we'll also go into a deeper dive and maybe look at that and take advantage of some of the other features that maybe Wheelhouse has available. So let's get started. This first page that I have pulled up here just to get some high level ideas of what's going on in the portfolio is the Wheelhouse market report. Now, Wheelhouse market reports are going to be pretty high level, like they include a lot of areas. Obviously, this market area is pretty big, but the main thing I'm really trying to get here is just a sense of the seasonality. I'm really trying to identify like what is the high season, what is the low season, what is the shoulder season. That's going to help me understand roughly when I should expect to be making bookings. We'll have some other data available that'll kind of help us see this, but for now, I'm going to go over here to this trends page, and I'm just going to take a look. I'm going to pull off this year too, and just kind of see how things are going in this market overall. I'm looking at everything. I'm not filtering down too much. I'm looking at the occupancy right now. Looks like January is pretty weak. February is probably a shoulder season. It looks about the same as August and September. So, and October, those are maybe strong shoulders. High seasons, probably March, April, June, July, and May is a maybe. You can see there's some differences in the year over year. So in 2022, it was pretty high, but it's a little lower in 2023. So this one's a maybe. This could be a shoulder. This could be a high. I think that fits with markets in this area. Particularly on the urban side, you see a lot of spring high seasons in the south, a little less in the summer, but since Charleston is right on the water, I think we get a pretty big boost. We'll see how that materializes in the portfolio. On top of that, December, November, January, pretty low. It's winter. Now, there's one other thing I want to check doing this is there's a few things I like to look at. One is if this matches the RevPAR, right? So you can see here that just proportionally in the shape, the RevPAR is a little different than the occupancy. Now, what that's going to imply to me is that even though from an occupancy perspective, these are really high book times, they're actually a little lower in rate. Like we're actualizing similar RevPAR or occupancy, but the RevPAR is lower, which means the rates are actually lower. And these low seasons can be really low. Like January is very poor, December is real poor, November is real poor. Summer seems to be the strong period. I'll be interested to see as we look at the portfolio how that changes between like stuff that's more like single family versus stuff that's more like multifamily in the downtown. But that is a pretty big indicator, because if I just looked at occupancy, I'd be like, oh, March, April, June, July, they're the same. When I look at RevPAR, even though these are still high seasons by occupancy, so I want to be really paying attention to what's booking there, they're not going to be at the same rate position. And I got to keep that in mind, right? Now, you can also see this, if you just click ADR. I usually look at RevPAR to look at it because it's like there's some truth there. I like to see how big of a difference there is. But looking at nightly rate's going to do the same thing. Now, I'm just going to go into a slightly higher level of detail here. I'm going to go to this historical and look at occupancy. We'll go back a year. And we got it at the daily level. So I just kind of want to see some of the trends that are occurring here. Looks like, weekends are obviously driving most of the occupancy in this market. Weekdays tend to be significantly lower. This is something I wanted to look at too, is how Christmas books. It looks like Christmas is pretty strong, but same with Thanksgiving. They're big bumps compared to the dates around it. But something we have to understand is if you draw a line across here at 60%, this is still lower than almost every other month's peak. So I just need to keep in mind that, like, even though Christmas is definitely strong for the season, it's not in any way like a summer date. It's not like one of your highest booked dates, just because it's just not reaching that occupancy, right? Same with Thanksgiving. There's a little bit of a bump here, but at most that's like equivalent to like a September weekend. And if we go back over here and looked at the RevPARs, September is not a high season. It's at best a shoulder, right? So just something to remember there. I'm just keeping that in mind. Holidays strong, people may feel strong about it, but it's not like it's June or July or even really March, which is very strong. I don't think I need to look at the year over year. I do want to look at this RevPAR situation again. Really just doing the same view. You can see that this is a little tempered over here. The weekday RevPARs are actually much lower. There's a much bigger gap between the occupancy and the RevPAR, which means rates are also super low on the weekdays. And we have that same kind of trend here. This is really just looking more like September. Maybe the rate's a little better, but it's not a July or June or March here. Now, the last thing I kind of want to check, this one's a little harder at this high level, but I do want to get a little heuristic for lead time. So I want to go over here to like July, which was a high season. And I'm just going to look at like the 2 bedrooms as a baseline and get an idea, and the high performers. I want to look at like stuff that actually is pretty well optimized and see where the 50% mark is roughly. So 50% at 55 days. That's pretty far out. That would be when I would call like the peak window, but that's actually in line with my heuristics. With an urban environment like this, I would tend to put a heuristic of like your peak window being between 30 days to 45 days for a 1 bedroom, around 60 for a 2 bedroom, maybe around 75 to 90 for a 3. That makes sense to me here. So that fits my heuristic. If you don't have that heuristic from doing a bunch of stuff, it doesn't hurt to check. I'm looking for that 50%. Now, that 50% means half the bookings are already on the books. I'm calling that peak window. You already have compression. You have a lot of people who are going to book inside of it. It's your best opportunity to hit maybe your peak rate. Now, that's not the same as the start of the window, though, because half of the bookings are already booked. You've already missed out on half the people who are going to come. So if we come over here to like 20%, that's here, right? That's at 90 to 95 days. This should be when I'm roughly should be paying attention to this state range, right? So I'm 90 days out, I'm at 80%, only 20%. That's a pretty good amount. 20% have been on the books. That's when I can really start to experiment. And this difference between here at 80% and here at like 50%, that's like the place I have the most room to experiment. I can push my rate. I can decide if I want to drive revenue. I have time to fix it if I screw it up. This is where you want to be taking your experiments. Once you get inside this 50% mark, like, you need to make sure that you're selling your properties. And once you get to like this, 80% on the other way, there's only 20% left. Like you need to have your stuff figured out. So 20 to 25, like you can't be doing your experimenting here. Now, my guess is if I put this at 1 bedrooms, this is going to shift in pretty far. Let's find that 50% again. 50% here is about 40 to 45. So that's what I was saying. And then that 20% is at about 15 days, so 2 weeks. That makes sense. You don't have time to experiment anything in 2 weeks. And then let's find that 80% again. 80%'s pretty far out. That's pretty interesting. My guess here is people maybe hold their rate a little high. But people are starting to look. That is really interesting. That might be unique to this market, that even the 1 bedrooms start their window further out, but you have a much bigger time. Like it's a much slower amount of pickup until you get to your peak, right? Let's just take a quick glance at the 3 bedrooms. We'll do kind of the same thing. And keep in mind, I'm looking at July. This might be worth looking at for say March also, just because it might have a little bit different trend. Okay, so 3 bedrooms, where's that 50%? That's about here at 75 days. Okay, so like my heuristics are pretty close here, right? For the peak window. I mentioned that date range already. 80% is going to be at about 120. Yeah, so that makes sense. And then we've got, let's see here, where's that other 20%? 20%'s at 35 days. So this is like where like most of your stuff's already on the books. You got to get it figured out. That means if you haven't booked up most of your properties and figured out what you need to do by 35 days, that's so far out. Some people don't even look that far out. You're like in trouble potentially. So I've got this document over here. I'll go over it in a minute, but I'm going to write these down. So Charleston, we've got high season, window heuristic. So for 1 bedrooms, it's let's put a graph in here actually. Table 3, so 20, 50, 80. Oh, I need one more. So 20% left, 50% left, 80% left. So this is start of window, peak window, no time left. Okay, so I'm going to mark that this is July. You can kind of do, like, really only need one of these heuristics per season. It does help to kind of spot check depending on how complex your market is. I don't really need to do it for the low season. My guess is it's just all going to be way shorter. As you get more and more developed, you can make this more granular. And let's do this. So this is bedrooms here. We've got 1, 2, 3. And you saw how as we did this, it kind of like shifted out. So let's do the 3 bedrooms. So this 80% was 115 to 120. So we'll do 120. We'll do the 50% at roughly 65. 65, and then this last bit, 20%'s at 35, 30 to 35. We'll say 35. When we did the 2 bedrooms, we've got 80 at 90. We've got 50 at 55, maybe 50. And then we've got 20 at 25. Oops. Okay, sorry. 120, 65, 35. Okay, so let's do the 1 bedrooms real quick. I know we just went through this, but bear with me here. 80 is at 90. So we've got it at 90. So pretty similar there. Interesting, the 2 bedrooms, right? We've got 50 at 40. And then we've got 20 at 15. So you can see this is all just kind of shifting in. Even though there's going to be other room types, we can kind of just guess, it's probably going to be another 15 to 30 days out. This, I think, is pretty interesting that these both start around the same time for these small ones, but as you get bigger, that'll probably start pushing out. If you wanted to, we could build another heuristic. I'm not going to do it today, but we could look at March, and just see how this is different for March 2023. Let's just find that 50% real quick. It's like around 40, 45. So a little bit earlier, honestly. Let's see, 40, 45. Nah, it's about the same. My guess is it's probably going to be pretty similar here. It does look like what is interesting here is that last 20% is much earlier in March, though. So that is where it's worth it. This is just a heuristic. We're telling us when we want to look, being a little bit more conservative, looking out further. But this is interesting because you can already see on this one bedroom that most of your reservations are already on the books by the time you get to a month out, even for the one bedrooms. If we did that for the three bedrooms, that 20%, it's like way out here, 30. Yeah, about the same. So there'll be some slight differences, but this is probably okay for us. So I'm just going to glance at one thing. I'm going to go back to this occupancy. I just wanted to see here if there was some pretty big differences in the way March looks than like July. So this is June, July here. And this is March. And I think the primary difference here is July is a little bit more regular. March has these like two big things. So maybe there's some kind of spring break thing going on, or it's kind of interesting that there's these two big bricks. These are like longer than just a weekend here and here, whereas this is a little bit more regular. We'll see how that turns up. So, okay. Did some high level review of the trends. Have an idea of how Charleston's going to look. I'm not going to look into Sevierville right now. Maybe we'll do that at another time. But let's go into the platform itself and talk about what I'm going to do to set this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have two tabs for Wheelhouse open, okay? This first tab is the portfolio calendar. So I have the portfolio calendar open on one tab. Now I can get to all of my listings. If I wanted to make changes, I can go ahead and do that. We'll see here that this is, totally fine. I have this set up in a certain way. Right now I'm hiding the nickname a little bit from you guys. I don't want to give you too much information. We can maybe hide a little bit more. I have the bedroom counts here, and right now I have them sorted by bedroom count. So as I'm scrolling down, you can see I have all these listings, and they're sorted by bedroom count. I have a few KPIs as well. So we have the last booked, we have the 30 and 90-day occupancy. I have this 90-day nightly revenue, but I actually don't need it. I don't care too much about the total revenue right now. I want to make decisions around occupancy first. That revenue side goes in a little bit more if I was going to do a deeper dive in an individual listing. So we've got a 30-day occupancy here. We've also got a 90-day occupancy, just a little longer thing. That I think is going to work out because we're really looking out into March and April and starting into the summer. So we want to see if those are starting to book out a little further. And then I have this little statistic here called booked nights in. So this is a sales statistic. This is how many nights have I sold in the last 7 days. So between that, I have an idea of occupancy and sales. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up a second tab. And this tab is the bookings page, right? So this bookings page is going to give me, basically, it's a visualization of this tape chart. So if I have this pulled up here, I can see where these sales are occurring on the map rather than just kind of scrolling through this and looking for gaps and not really knowing if, these reservations are new or not. So the way I have this configured on this bookings page is, right now we're looking at all the listings. We'll cut that down. I have this set to booked nights. It's a personal preference of mine. Some people use occupancy. I like booked nights. I also have this set to the daily level. So what this is showing me here is each individual day. So April 13th in this case, there are 40 nights booked to stay over that day. That means there's 40 reservations over that day on the calendar. And it's also highlighting my sales. So in the last 14 days, I've sold 11 reservations on that night. That's going to be pretty helpful here because at a glance, I just have a map of where my sales are going. I can interact with this so I can zoom in a little bit. If I wanted to add some last year pacing, I can do so. We'll get into that a little bit more. I may not use too much of the last year pacing right now because I need to organize the portfolio in a way that we can see that a little easier. But for right now, I'm going to use this. This is where I'm going to identify where I might want to make changes in production. And then if I decide I want to make any changes, I'm going to use this screen to actually adjust those things, maybe leave some notes for the other people who are in charge of this portfolio. So that's the main setup I have now. Bookings page, set at the daily level with booked nights. Calendar so that I can actually interact with the rates. Okay, so next piece too, I've done some of this work ahead of time, but I went through this portfolio just like we kind of did with these booking window heuristics. But I went through and I put these into groups because there's a whole bunch of different kinds of properties within this portfolio. Even though like a lot of them are in the market of Charleston, there's some bed and breakfast style units, there's some single family homes, there's some units that are kind of like in outskirt neighborhoods. So I've gone ahead and I've built groups for these. And I kind of organize the order that I'm going to look at them, right? I want to look at all of Charleston. It's going to include the outskirts, the bed and breakfast units, and any midterm units. Then I want to look at these in smaller groups. So I want to look at the short-term rental units and the B&B units to get an idea of how production is going. And I'm probably going to go through those by bedroom count. I want to just look at the B&B because they're kind of like a property that exists on its own. And then I might decide to look at these outskirt units. There's not too many, but we'll see if like they look too different. You'll also notice there's a few other types of properties here that I put groups down. Second, what I did is, this was for my own learning, I put down the unit type groups here, like how many units of each type are in it. So like in this group, there's 15 ones, 8 twos. This was an intermediary step. It's mostly because this is how I want to look at these units, right? I want to look at all of Charleston, look at the ones, look at the twos. I'll look at the 3, 4s, and 5s together and the 5s through 11s together. When I go to Charleston and kind of go in depth, I'm going to look at that downtown group. Same kind of thing, just talking to myself about how I'm going to break up this data and look at it. And for me, this is really what I want to look at every time I pull this up. I'm going to go through each of these groups and I'm going to get an idea of, is this group selling well? Are there dates that are doing well? Is there anything I need to change? Now, as I make those decisions, I may decide to dig into very specific properties. I'm not going to do that too much today, I don't think, but that's the easy thing where, that's why we have these statistics here, because within a group, something might be doing really well, but you're like, why is this listing not selling? Or why does it have such low occupancy? And you would want to pull that up and actually look at the specific listing. Additionally, once we get more into kind of reviewing the overall rate structure, I'm probably going to do a lot of that at the individual listing level. For now, let's just start and kind of look at production. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's pull up this first group. We're just going to look at Charleston. I'm going to pull it up here on the calendar. I'm using this new feature called segments, so I can just click it. It's going to pull over this. I might add a filter because I don't know if all these listings are on, so we'll just use the on listings. And then on the bookings page, I'm going to select that same tag. So that one is using just the market for Charleston. And I'm just going to pull that up, right? And you can see that this platform is going to change this quite a bit pretty quickly. So I've got 77 listings across Charleston. And when I look at this, let's just zoom in a bit. Well, actually, we'll wait. Hold on. Before we zoom in, we can kind of see where we've got sales here. This is something to note. There's a few sales like way far out here in September and October. There's not a lot. It's only been one in the last 2 weeks, maybe 2. So I'm probably not going to pay attention. But already I know, like, if I continue to see sales here, this might be something I want to pay attention to, right? Especially if this starts to spike up. Now, since it's not spiking up too high, and if I click it to the last week, I haven't made any this week, so it was only in the last 2 weeks, I'm going to kind of ignore this long tail out here. That especially makes sense because when we look at these windows, we're about 90 days out from June, so we probably haven't started our July window yet. We might just be at the very beginning of that. If I'm applying this to March, I mean, we're already in this zone on all 3, so we're already in some kind of trouble. We're probably in this zone for April, which was pretty strong. May was a little weaker, so we may not be even in that window yet. So already I'm getting an idea of how I want to think about where I should be here. Basically, March needs to be done. Like that stuff needs to be filled up. I'm running out of time. April should be like really solidly selling right now, if not already getting pretty full. May, probably haven't started selling too much yet. June, July, August haven't started selling too much yet. But as I look at this over the next couple weeks, I need to start seeing sales in that zone, right? So if a few weeks go by and I'm not seeing sales in this July zone, I know I'm going to be in trouble. So let's go ahead and click this and zoom in a little bit here, just so we don't have to see too much. We'll go all the way through July. I might even take this through June. That's roughly the end of June. Okay, so as I'm looking at this, there's a few things that I can see here. One is, let's make sure we're only looking at the listings that are on again. Automation on. So we've got about 69 listings total, which means a sold out night is going to be 69. So at a glance, the next couple weeks, I have pretty strong occupancy and also pretty strong sales, right? So I'm selling on almost every date except for this March 12th. Now, none of these are hitting 69. So barring any blocks or like things that maybe aren't available, I'm not really hitting my sellout. Maybe that's something I want to check into. So I may make a note like what units aren't selling out in March, and can I change that? Another thing I'll look at is like this date range here at the end of March is selling at a kind of a higher amount than any other listing, right? So it's kind of bumping up. It's not like a nice smooth movement down. That might be a date range that has some possibilities. I can show you that in a slightly different way. You can see that that end of March is actually one of the highest sales day in the last week. And if I add the last 2 weeks, it's also one of the highest sales days in the last 2 weeks. So that's kind of interesting to me. I want to keep that in mind. This is interesting, right? There's this gap here in March 29th. We'll probably want to look at that because it's just not selling evenly. April, this first week in April, this is maybe like around Easter. This one's pretty interesting because it is really highly occupied, but it's not selling. So that might mean that we need to make some rate adjustments there just to try to get it the rest of the way. These two vacancy gaps may be something I'm paying attention to, but then it could be that these dates are spiking up, so there's some opportunities there. So let's recap what we're going to look at here. We're going to look at, I'm actually going to write this down on a piece of paper. The next 2 weeks of March. Well, I'll type it up for you guys just so you can see it. So we want to look at, and then I'll show you what I'm doing here. 3, 5, 24. So next 2 weeks of March, what units aren't booking to get sell out? We want to look at this, the March 26th, 7 high sales, March 29th through March 31st, low sales, low occupancy, April 1 to maybe April 4, that's stalled, right? Stalled means it's higher occupancy, but it's not selling, right? So we got that kind of situation here. And then maybe we'll look at these weekends, April 11 to 13, April 18 to 21. Both of these date ranges are high pickup. So high pickup. Pickup meaning is like another term for sales. So if I bring this over here, you can see that I've just written some notes for myself that I can refer to so that I can kind of go look at these. Now, before I go and look at what's going on the calendar, I'm probably going to go, these are just a high level, right? Like I kind of have an idea here, but I'm looking at all of Charleston. I kind of want to go and look at a little bit more detailed view to see if there's differences between these different groups of units. So let's take a look here at this group, Charleston, downtown, STR, and B&B. So I'll just search for that, Charleston, downtown STR BNB, right? This is a pretty big group here. There's 56, so most of these listings are in this group. It makes sense that this is going to follow the same kind of trend. But I'm going to go to a little level of detail here because we know there's a bunch of different bedroom counts. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the bedrooms, and let's just do the zeros and ones first, right? These kind of small ones. They should have this short window. Now, this is pretty interesting to me. Like, we're getting very, very booked out here. We probably have some multi-unit listings. These are booking a little bit further out than you might expect. So we mentioned that we want to look at this April date in particular. The fact that this is booking so much is maybe an indicator that we have some opportunities. So this zone here, pretty strong. I'm also going to look here. I'm not too concerned about these gaps in the short one because the booking window is so short. If you recall, we have such a short booking window here that even at 40 days, this is just inside of that, and we are selling quite a bit. So maybe we don't have to be too concerned. So let's pull that same group up here. So I'm going to do downtown STR plus BNB. I'm going to add in the bedroom counts of zeros and ones. And let's just take a look at some of these date ranges here. So the first thing I'm going to note is if I sort this by the next 30-day occupancy, this one listing isn't selling at all. It actually doesn't look like it's on. So let's see if we can filter it out here. Automation active. All right, so it's not even on. And when I search by this, nothing is like really sticking out as being super duper low. And nothing has really not sold in the last week, which is great. All of these units are operating at decent prices. We have just a lot of little gaps in the short term, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. One thing that I'll bring up, but I'm not going to deal with today, is these listings down here that are the most occupied. There may be some opportunities to actually raise the overall rate position here, especially if they also show up as really occupied in the next 90 days, which it looks like they are. These are listings that overall, if they're performing well, not this one, it's blocked, but these ones here, if they're performing really well, we might be able to raise the base rate a little bit on those, yeah. But let's go through here and let's take a look at some of these date ranges that we were looking at. So this is interesting here, just at a glance. We didn't highlight that on this. That's the 16th. The 16th has pretty strong sales, a lot of sales in the last week, actually, last minute. I am noticing that these are orphans. So across these units, there's actually only like this random date available. So what we might do here is that would be an opportunity for us to kind of change the rate a little bit. I'm not sure why my screen is doing that, but let's try that. So let's do this. I'm just going to go ahead and use the make adjustment because there's kind of some different adjustments here, and we'll just drop this rate a little bit. These are minor things. These are the kind of things that you don't have to do if you're in a really high production environment like a city where people do stay for like one night stays and you're able to take them. Sometimes it's worth just trying to capture that extra revenue on these like random nights, right? Because it's just a Saturday. It's kind of a hard day to book. We might even want to go a little bit lower. I'm going to leave a note here. Dropped orphans Saturday nights, 20%, probably could go a bit lower. You want to be careful about how far out you do this. It really depends on your, it really depends on, what am I trying to say here? It really depends on your cancellation policy. So I'm just going to create that reminder. Since I added this note here, when I reload this later, what it's going to do too is it'll also show up on the calendar. So whoever's looking at this next will see that. Okay, so I'm not totally sure why my screen is not resizing like that, but we'll just have to deal with it. So let's see here. Where did I want to look? I really want to look at this 26th because that's booking really early, in my opinion. And we don't have too much left. So we have a full weekend here. Now, this is a decision. We might be able to bump this rate up a little bit. This top unit's a multi-unit, so we have a few rooms left, and even one of those is booked. What's interesting is I thought this 26th date would have been a weekend. Just looking at this, it's very odd that that is spiking up on just the Tuesday. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe just grab this and increase it a little bit. We've sold so much in the last week here. It's on track to sell out. We might be able to capture a little more. Even this listing at the bottom in terms of occupancy has sold a room. Or in fact, it might have even sold two. So I'm just going to up this a little bit. Just make a little tweak, make 10% here or there. For the most part, the model's adjusting these. It's going to keep rates a little higher, so I don't need to go crazy on this usually. But let's do this adjusted 10% because high pickup last 7, even in lowest OCC listing. JJT. And we'll set a reminder for tomorrow. I would probably look at this towards the end of the week. What I want to make sure is if I up the rate here that this doesn't just stall and then those other rooms don't get booked. Now there's another zone we wanted to look at. I want to look at this like April 18th through the 20th. So I'm going to go over here to jump to calendar and we'll go to April 17th. So April 18th to the 20th. So this one's making quite a few sales. And what's interesting is we actually have some rates here that are some of the higher quality units have some opportunities to sell. Now, what's interesting is they've gone ahead and dropped those units already. That might be a good decision. Just because you can see that even though these are really high occupied in the short term, they're a little lower here, like especially these two. So I think we could raise this rate a little bit, but I'm going to leave out those two middle units here. So I just clicked and held to grab these. I'm also going to include, I'm not going to include this one just because it's an orphan. And we're just going to up this a little bit here. Make adjustment, 10%. Actually, I'm going to do it here too. I think that this is where you kind of are making decisions. There's no right answer here. I think that because this is booking so much, there's definitely, and it's so early because these are 1 bedrooms, it's really small. We should be able to capture some additional revenue, and we have plenty of time to adjust it as long as we don't forget about it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you're going to make these kind of micro changes, you do want to look at this at least once a week. It's really important you don't let dates go stall. So you don't want to make micro changes like this if you're only going to look at this once a month, because you do run the risk of actually bumping your rate too high. So let's add a note here. This rate due to high pickup. High pickup last week. JJD. Okay, and then I'm going to enable a reminder here and we'll set it for tomorrow. Normally I would set these reminders for later, but I want the other people who look into this portfolio to see them. Okay, so let's go ahead and just take a look at a different group now. So I'm still looking at this group, STRBnB. I want to look at the 2 bedrooms. According to my list, there's about 8 of these. And I'm going to reflect that here too. So we'll do the 2 bedrooms. Okay, I'm going to see if I can get this to like stop resizing again. I don't know why it's showing up way over there. Okay, well, life is hard. Must be the screen share. Okie dokie. So let's do this. So this is pretty interesting, right? There is not a lot of sales in this 2 bedroom group, which is not good. Now, occupancy is very, very high all the way out. And we are actually pretty good for our booking window. This vacancy gap, March 28th to 31st, 3/28 to 3/31, maybe something I want to look at, this vacancy gap here, 13 to 16. also something important. But my hunch here is that we're actually doing pretty well. We'll see if we can get some fill there. We are booking out far. I'd like to see a little bit more booking out here, but I'm not going to do any changes right now. I'm going to let that sit for another week or two probably. And I do want to start seeing June bookings sometime by the end of March. But my hunch here is we're still not quite hitting the sellout, so I wonder if a unit is just blocked. Okay, yeah. So we've got a unit blocked here. So we don't have to worry about that. We are hitting sellout. We have a lot of little gaps here. I'm just going to go ahead and drop these in the gaps, honestly. That way, if there is a cancellation, we have a pretty good chance of like booking. This zone here, it's unfortunate these are blocked. That was one of the zones I was talking about looking at, but we actually can't sell most of that. But there is no full weekends here, except for like right here. So let's go up to that point and let's just drop this a little bit. See if we can just get a little bit extra fill in these gaps, especially with this like really high priced unit. And that way, if there's a cancellation, we don't have to like try to manage it in case something becomes available again. It's just going to try to book, right? I do want to look at this 322 to 23. This is like the only spot in the next few weeks where we have a full weekend available. Unfortunately, there's a lot of orphans. 320, 423. So we haven't made any sales here in the last 2 weeks. So that's pretty interesting. This unit isn't selling that well. We've only sold a little. It's not super high occupancy. This unit right here, this Ashley unit, that would be a pretty good unit to actually do a deep dive into. It's not really performing like the rest of the listings. We may want to go and do a deep dive and maybe adjust the base rate or see if we need to change something about it or even go check the distribution. For now, I'm going to let this sit. I'm actually kind of hesitant to let this sit because this is within 30 days. And if we looked back here, that means we're really at the end of this window. This needs to get booked. Otherwise, we're going to have to start dramatically adjusting this. So I'm going to drop this a little smaller amount right now. I would have liked to do this earlier. I would have liked to drop this like 10%, maybe 2 weeks ago, but we'll try 15 for now. That may not be enough. And we'll leave a note here for them. Dropped 15% because unit has not been booking super strong recently. This date is full and we are within the last 20% of the booking window, giving us limited time. Okay, reminder to the 6th. And I'll put in here, I suggest that we review the base rate here and do a deeper dive on this listing. And I'm going to put that one on the base rate actually, just so that it shows up in other places. Okay, cool. So let's go through this again. I mean, really what I want to do is I want to go through all these groups. I'm going to do 3s and 4s together just because of the unit counts here. Now, 3s and 4s, we should be expecting to see these bookings further out, right? This beginning of the window is at 120 days. That's 4 months. That's July. Okay. So we should start to see bookings out here. We really need this stuff in the next 30 days to be full. And we really want this stuff in April and May to have good booking pace. And when I look at this, we've got kind of a mixed result here. We're pretty full in March. That looks good, but we're not getting anything in the short term. That like supports what I'm saying, which is if we look forward 2 weeks, there's not really anything coming in. We're like way inside of this 35-day window. So we needed to deal with this earlier, anything that was left. We're making a little bit of reservations out here, but we're not making enough to really be comfortable selling out. So I'm thinking here like March needs just a cut in general. And I'm a little skeptical about this out here in April. Like I think these should really be selling in earnest across every weekend, and we're not. And in some cases, we're barely selling anything in 2 weeks. My hunch is that anything that's left in March, we just want to cut, try to get filled. In April, we probably want to start doing little cuts, maybe a little bit into May, probably definitely into this early June zone. We want to be seeing reservations appearing on this across the board. Let's zoom this one out a little bit because we do want to get into July. We're seeing a little bit. This just looks a little bit sluggish to me. Now, I don't think we have this portfolio set up to really look at the historical data that well. We don't. There's a bunch of new listings here. So this isn't that helpful. We'll do some work on the next one and look at some historical data. Although it does look like they're pretty similar. When we do a deep dive, my guess is that they probably had to drop their rate a lot in the summer, and they're overpricing right now. I kind of know that that's the case. So let's just go ahead and look at these over here. Let's look at these 3s and 4s. I already kind of know what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop whatever's left in March. We are going to... How many of these should there be? One sec, I'm just looking. There's a lot. Okay, so this makes sense. So we're going to drop whatever's left here if there's room. A lot of these are kind of already at the minimum, so we don't have to worry too much. I would suggest we do a slight drop in April. Let's see when he did this. He just did these today, so I'm not going to do any more here because he's already doing what I'm saying. He probably went a little bit heavy through April. I probably wouldn't have done 20. I might have done 10, but this is what I mean. There's no right answer. Going into May, this 10% looks about right to me. And then let's see, didn't do it into June. I would consider experimenting an additional 10% into June and July. Now, this is something that's really important to note. There's a lot of listings here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort this by the 90-day occupancy. Pretty much in March, those big drops that are made, those are fine. We're going to do that for every unit because we're really just trying to fill any gaps. But once we start getting into April, May, and June, there may be some listings here that we don't really want to touch, that we may not have wanted to put this on. And a few of those are going to be like this one here would be one that maybe we don't want to do that on because it's higher occupancy in the 90-day. It's been selling. These ones are good candidates to do that drop. They haven't sold anything in a week. That's a concern for me. Even though they're kind of high occupancy, you'd think they're doing well, but they haven't sold what's there. These ones, maybe, let's actually sort this by the 7-night pickup, the booked in the last 7 nights, because this could be a good one. I mean, this isn't huge sales. We really want to be seeing like a couple reservations a week from these because they need to be falling across like 4 months. So, all of these probably are a candidate to drop. We might make the case that like these listings, we do a little smaller drop in April and don't apply the summer drops, right? This is what, if anyone knows Ben from R&R, he would call bottom-up revenue management, right? So I'm going to leave a note here. And let's do this. Let's take off the May stuff for this one. So let's just remove the May adjustments on these. Removed the May negative adjustment just because they have some decent sales pace. I'll mark my name. We'll put a reminder here for tomorrow. And then I do want to go ahead and tweak June a little. Now, what's interesting is we identified these ones. Let's go ahead and tweak June for all of them but these ones, right? And let's just do June here. Let's do an additional -10. We could do this into July, not -140. All right, let's go ahead and put in the notes here. Applied a small rate cut to June because 3-bed group should be in this window near peak window, and pickup is just a bit sluggish. I'll leave him some additional notes, them some additional notes. Seems to be in line with year-over-year pacing, but we have a hunch that the settings are set to overprice summer, which may have happened last year too. Did not include listings with stronger sales pace. JGD. Okay. Let's go ahead and put that note there. Okay, so now basically what I would do is I would just keep going through these different groups here, right? Like we have this one bigger group left we could look at. So this one's a problem. There's not many listings here, but like these probably need to be looked at individually. The fact that there's no sales in 2 weeks is a major problem, especially because these are even bigger. They need to be selling out through the whole summer. Because there's only 5 listings, we would probably, rather than doing something in bulk, want to actually just open up these listings and look at them individually so we can see the whole calendar, compare to their historicals. I can give you a short snapshot into that. Let's take a look at maybe like this 6-bedroom. If I open this up here, and then I'm going to zoom in a little. There's a few things that we're going to do. If I look at this, so this doesn't have a lot of availability to book. This may not be a good example, but let's just see if it has historicals. It does. So what I did is I pulled up the historicals, and you can just see that this listing's way overpriced. Pretty much across the board. It doesn't matter too much here, but like when we look at summer, where this actualized last year is nowhere near where we're pricing, and that's a significant problem. Now, that's evident here. It's not selling anything. It's not even selling in the range. Nothing in this group is. So my hunch is we have the same problem. I'm running out of time today, but I want to take a look in a future session about how we would take this and kind of analyze this and maybe make a decision to reset the settings, and then how we would maybe apply, like check to see if that trend is in other places and apply it to other listings. Because right now, what we really need to do is figure out how to bring this pricing more in line with the historicals. If we think the historicals were a little low, be very intentional about how we're raising that rate and doing that sort of thing. So just to recap, today we went through a little bit about how we set up our workstation for this kind of weekly process by pulling up the portfolio calendar, by pulling up the bookings page. We walked through some high-level information and wrote that down about just what we might expect in the coming season for this marketplace. I also talked to you about how I organize the portfolio so that I can go through these. Together, we went through all of this. We went through the high level. We went through Charleston in depth, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3, 4, and we glanced at this last group. But, you know, if we were doing this and I wasn't just talking to you, I would probably have gone through all of these groups. So all of Charleston, all of just this downtown, maybe look at Lake Norman, maybe look at Sevierville. And I hope that you guys got some stuff out of this. We'll continue to do this. It's just going to be us pulling stuff up and making changes, taking a look at it, pulling up more detail. But hopefully by watching a revenue manager kind of work on this and talk to themselves and make decisions, you'll get an idea of how to approach this in your own portfolio. Thanks so much.